Let's see if you're even mine, my father remarked, sliding a DNA test kit across the Thanksgiving table, past the cranberry sauce, past the gravy boat, directly onto my plate. 25 relatives burst into laughter. My brother high-fived him. My mother fixed her gaze on her wine glass as though it contained the secrets she'd guarded for 30 years. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I picked up the kit, met my father's eyes, and spoke one word. Okay. 3 weeks later, the results arrived. I emailed them to every person at that table. My mother fainted. My father let his fork clatter because the test confirmed I was his only biological child. The golden boy he'd poured everything into wasn't his at all. But I'm jumping ahead. Before I continue, if this story truly resonates with you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? My name is Caroline Mitchell. I'm 28. I'm a pediatric ICU nurse at a modest hospital just outside Richmond, Virginia. This is the story of how my father's cruelest jest turned into the truth that finally set me free. Let me take you back to Thanksgiving last November, the night everything shifted. The Mitchell family never treated Thanksgiving lightly. My father, Richard Mitchell, Rick to those who feared him and pretended otherwise, hosted it annually at the house on Briarwood Lane, a 4,000-square-foot colonial he built with his own crew in 2003. That was Dad. He made sure you knew every possession was hard-earned. The dining table was a 10-foot slab of reclaimed Virginia oak, bought from an antique dealer in Stowe, Vermont. 12 chairs with hand-turned spindles. Father claimed the head. My brother Garrett sat to his right, in the chair bearing GM carved into the backrest, Dad's doing when Garrett was 6, like a quiet coronation. I sat at the far end, near the kitchen door, closest to the serving platters. Someone had to refill them. 25 people filled the room. Aunts, uncles, cousins, Garrett's wife, and their 4-year-old son, Mason. Father wore his Breitling Navitimer, purchased when Mitchell & Son Construction cleared its first $1 million year. Garrett sported new Cole Haan loafers. My mother, Jolene, wore her cream Talbot's blazer and the Mikimoto pearl bracelet Dad gave her for their 25th anniversary, an anniversary I wasn't invited to. I wore a cardigan from nursing school days, gray, pilled at the elbows. Look closely at the Mitchells around that table, and one detail stands out. Every single one was blonde, sandy, honey, platinum. Then there was me, auburn hair, reddish in the light, dark enough to stand out in every family photo like an error in an official record. For 20 years, my father treated that difference as evidence. But this Thanksgiving, Dad brought something to the table that wasn't on the menu. Here are 20 years condensed in 60 seconds. At 8, I made a Father's Day card, construction paper, glitter glue, the works. To the best dad in the world, in my finest cursive. He opened it at breakfast, read it, then tore it in half. I'm not your dad, and returned to his eggs. I was 8. At 14, Dad enrolled Garrett in St. Andrew's Prep, $12,000 a year, blazers, ties, the full experience. I attended Hopewell Public. When Aunt Brenda asked why, Dad declared it plainly on Sunday dinner. Why invest in something that might not even be mine? I sat 3 feet away. Silence. At 18, I graduated high school. Valedictorian, 4.3 GPA, a speech I rehearsed 40 times in the bathroom mirror. Dad didn't attend. He was hosting a barbecue for 50 people, a celebration for Garrett, who'd graduated with a 2.4 and a football coach's handshake. At 22, halfway through nursing at VCU, Dad cut my tuition without notice. 1 semester remained. He called. I've paid for someone else's kid long enough. I took out $47,000 in federal loans. I finished. He never asked whether I did. My mother's role deserves mention. At 19, I discovered she'd been quietly sending me $200 a month via Venmo, memo, groceries. Dad found the transfers and threatened divorce. She stopped. My father didn't hate me. Hate demands recognition. He simply erased me. Now Garrett Mitchell, 31, 6'2", sandy blonde, jaw like a catalog model. Dad's pride, dad's proof, the Mitchell heir, capital H. At 16, Garrett received a brand new pearl white F-150, lifted with Mitchell and Son decals on the tailgate like a coat of arms. I got a bus gas. Dad covered every dollar of Garrett's Virginia Tech tuition. 4 years, no loans, no questions. When Garrett graduated with middling grades and a business degree he rarely used, Dad handed him a corner office at Mitchell and Sons and the title Project Manager. No interview, no resume, just assumed bloodline, or what he believed was bloodline. Last spring, Garrett bought a house in Willowbrook. New construction, 3,200 square feet, open floor plan, quartz counters. Dad wrote the $80,000 deposit check. I live in a 450 square foot studio 4 blocks from the hospital. The kitchen counter doubles as my desk. After 12-hour ICU shifts, I eat standing because the table fits only 1 chair. Garrett drives a black Chevy Tahoe. I drive a 2014 Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper from a nursing school parking lot. It still runs. That's enough. Garrett isn't evil. To be fair, he never thought he was doing wrong. When everything is handed to you from birth, you don't question the system. You assume you deserve it. His favorite line, delivered with that effortless golden boy grin, "Don't worry, Cal. You'll always be an honorary Mitchell." Honorary. Like a visitor's pass to my own family. But here's the part that might make you laugh, or perhaps not. The irony. I'll get there. You're not quite ready yet. My mother, Jolene Mitchell, 54. Blonde highlights every 6 weeks at a short pump salon, champagne gold Lexus RX, a supplementary card on Dad's Amex Platinum, used like oxygen. Jolene wasn't cruel. That's what made it harder. She never called me a mistake, never tore my cards or skipped my graduation. She simply never intervened. Whenever Dad delivered a barb, Mom studied her wine glass, her napkin, the wallpaper pattern. She mastered the art of seeing nothing while everything unfolded before her. At 16, alone in the kitchen, after Thanksgiving, fitting, right? I looked her straight in the eye. "Mom, am I Dad's daughter?" She didn't flinch. She set down the dish towel and said, "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to." That sentence lived in me for 12 years. I carried it like a smooth stone in my pocket, turning it over, searching for meaning. Was she confirming his doubts, warning me, protecting herself? It took 12 years to see it was the third. Dad laughed from deep in his chest. Mom offered her practiced, on-cue smile. I was passing the sweet potatoes when he rose, tapping his knife against his glass. The room fell silent. 25 faces turned to him. He looked every inch the man about to toast at his own coronation. "I've got a little gift for Callie this year," he announced. He reached under his chair, pulled out a white and green box, a home DNA testing kit, held it high for all to see, then slid it down the table toward me. It bumped my water glass. "Let's see if you're even mine." The room exploded in laughter, the loud, relieved kind that erupts when discomfort finds an easy target. Uncle Dennis chuckled into his bourbon, and Brenda averted her eyes. Garrett slapped the table. "Savage, Dad." Jolene went pale. I watched her fingers clamp around the stem of her glass until I thought it might shatter, but she said nothing. She never did. I picked up the box. A heavier quiet settled over the room. I met my father's gaze. His eyes sparkled with amusement. He expected tears, perhaps, or a slammed door. 20 years of precedent suggested I'd break. "Okay," I said. Just that. Okay. I slipped the kid into my bag, finished my dinner, said goodnight to Aunt Brenda, and drove home alone in my dented Civic. In my studio apartment, I sat at the kitchen counter and opened the box. It wasn't ideal. A consumer ancestry kit measures ethnicity, not paternity. But it sparked the real plan. That same night, I ordered a proper paternity test from an AABB-accredited lab, chain of custody, court-admissible results, the kind that matter. I needed 2 samples. Mine was straightforward, a cheek swab, sealed and labeled. His was simpler still, the monogrammed handkerchief he'd left on the chair. Linen, navy-threaded initials RAM. He dabbed wine from his chin and discarded it without a second thought. I sealed it in a plastic bag and mailed both samples the next morning. No one knew. You wanted the truth, Dad. So did I. The family group chat, 42 members, created by Dad 5 years ago mostly for holiday plans and Garrett's unrequested construction updates, ignited before I'd even changed out of my scrubs the next morning. Dad had posted a photo, me from the night before, holding the kid at the table. Someone's phone, angled from across the room, my face half turned, mouth slightly open, stunned, exposed. Caption, "Let's see if the mailman left more than just letters." Garrett replied first, 3 laughing emojis, then DNA don't lie, Dad. Uncle Pete, oh man, Rick. Cousin Tara, a single crying laughing. Apparently dissent in the Mitchell family. No one called it cruel. No one said, Rick, she's your daughter. No one offered anything resembling defense. 42 people witnessed a public jab at my parentage. The responses were laughter or silence. I read every message at 2:47 a.m. in the pediatric ICU break room, fluorescent lights humming overhead. I'd just come off a code, a 3-year-old with RSV, 40 touch-and-go minutes before we stabilized her. My hands still carried the scent of nitrile gloves. Between a student loan reminder and a weather alert, there it was on my phone. I screenshotted everything, every message, every emoji, every loaded pause. Dana Reeves, my coworker and closest friend, the only one at the hospital who knew my family story, saw my face when I set the phone down. She didn't pry. She simply said, "Get the facts, Callie, then let the facts speak." I locked my phone, returned to my patients. The lab had my samples. The clock was running. 3 weeks before Christmas, my phone rang. Dad. No hello, no preamble. Christmas is for family. You know where you stand. 16 seconds. He hung up. I checked the call log afterward, staring as if the duration might explain what the words wouldn't. Garrett texted an hour later. Classic Garrett. Kindness as performance while delivering the verdict. No hard feelings, Cal. It's Dad's house, his rules. Maybe next year things will be different. Then Mom. Not comfort, not apology, just please don't make this worse. 3 messages from 3 Mitchells. Not one said this is wrong. Not one said I'm sorry. Their consensus was clear. My absence would make the holiday smoother for everyone. So I spent Christmas Eve alone. I bought a small Douglas fir from the lot on Patterson Avenue, 4 feet tall, $60 I probably shouldn't have spent. I set it on my kitchen counter beside my laptop and patient charts, made boxed mac and cheese, poured a single glass of $7 Merlot, not Kymus, and sat in my one chair to eat. Outside, Richmond was cold and crisp. Across the street, apartment windows glowed with colored lights, silhouettes moving behind curtains. At 11:43 p.m., I opened my email. Subject, your DNA test results are ready. Action required. From the lab, time-stamped that afternoon. My thumb hovered. Pulse thrummed in my fingertips. I closed the app. Not yet. I finished my wine, turned off the lights, went to bed. The results would wait until morning. So would I. January 6th, 9:14 a.m. An email from Richard A. Mitchell to the family distribution list. CC Caroline Mitchell. Subject, Estate Planning Update. Formal reading January 18th, 10 a.m. Obtain. Blunt, load-bearing, no frills. The way he built houses. After careful consideration and consultation with my attorney, Howard Pratt, I have decided that Mitchell assets, property, business shares, and financial holdings should pass exclusively to my biological children. Formal reading, January 18th, 10 a.m., Howard Pratt's office. Attendance expected. Signature, Richard A. Mitchell, Mitchell & Sons Construction LLC, ST 1998. Garrett replied all in under 4 minutes. Thanks, Dad. The right call. No one else responded, but 42 people read it. He'd CC'd me deliberately, not BCC. He wanted me to see, wanted me to know this was no longer a dinner table barb or group chat jest. It was legal, official, permanent. Biological children. 2 words meant as my eviction. I read it 3 times, then a fourth, slower. Something unlocked. A door I hadn't noticed swing open. Biological children. If the lab in Maryland confirmed I was Rick's biological child, that language didn't exclude me, it shielded me. And if I was his, while the will specified biological children only, the real question wasn't about my place, it was about Garrett's. I closed my laptop, went to work, intubated a 6-year-old with pneumonia, didn't think about the email again until my 14-hour shift ended, but it waited, patient as everything else. January 9th, I went to Garrett's house to retrieve a box of old family photos Mom said she'd left in his garage. Garrett wasn't home. Stacy let me in. Polite, distant, the way you treat a distant relative at a viewing. She gestured toward the garage and returned to the kitchen. Mason, 4 years old, was in the living room, blonde curls, Garrett's grin, a dinosaur in each hand. He looked up as I passed and delivered with the unfiltered honesty only a child can muster. "Daddy says you're not real family. You don't belong here." He said it like stating a fact. The sky is blue. No cruelty, just a truth he'd absorbed from the grown-ups who shaped his world. I stopped, not because of the words, I'd heard worse from his. I knelt down to his level. "Sweetie, family isn't about what people say. It's about what's real." Mason blinked up at me, then returned to his dinosaurs as if the conversation had never happened. He'd already moved on. I hadn't. I collected the box of photos, thanked Stacy, and sat in my Civic for 10 minutes with the engine off. The heater clicked as it cooled. My breath clouded the windshield. Then I opened my phone, opened my email, and finally tapped the subject line I'd avoided since Christmas. Probability of paternity, 99.9998%. Richard A. Mitchell is the biological father of Caroline R. Mitchell. I read it twice, 3 times, 4. And in that frozen moment, I thought of a question I'd like to ask you. Have you ever stood at the edge of a truth that could shatter everything, yet you had to step forward anyway because the uncertainty hurt worse than any possible wreckage? That's exactly where I was, parked in my brother's driveway, hands trembling, heater silent, screen glowing in my lap. I'd love to hear your story if you've been there. Drop it in the comments. I closed the email, shifted into reverse, and drove to work. But something inside me had shifted forever. The stone I'd carried for 12 years, don't ask questions you don't want answers to, finally revealed its true weight. It was never about shielding me, it was about shielding everyone else. I sat with the results for 3 days, not from doubt. The lab was AABB accredited, the gold standard for paternity testing in the United States. Chain of custody documented, results notarized, 99.9998%. In science, that's certainty short of watching conception itself. I sat with them because of what they confirmed. I was Rick Mitchell's daughter, his biological daughter, the same child he'd branded a mistake for 20 years, the one he denied tuition, attention, and basic kindness. I was his, always had been, which meant the affair my mother had, the one Dad had punished me for since I was 8, hadn't produced me. It had produced someone else. I replayed Mom's face at Thanksgiving, the instant pallor when Dad slid the kid across the table, the way her fingers strangled the wine stem. She hadn't been mortified for me, she'd been terrified for herself. She'd always known that one real DNA test would unravel everything, not her secret about me, but her secret about Garrett. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. She wasn't protecting me from pain, she was protecting Garrett from devastation, and herself from the only loss she couldn't survive. Rick discovering that his golden boy, his heir, the child he'd carved initials into a chair for, carried another man's blood. I considered calling her. I lifted the phone twice. Both times I set it down. What could I say? Mom, I know. She'd deny, she'd cry, she'd plead, and I'd end up exactly where I'd always been, carrying someone else's secret, swallowing someone else's shame, preserving peace at the cost of myself. Not anymore. Instead, I called a lawyer. Margaret Foley's office sat on Main Street in Mechanicsville, a narrow brick building wedged between a barber shop and a CPA firm. Second floor, no elevator. Her desk drowned under case files and a half-eaten granola bar. The bookshelves behind her bowed under thick volumes of Virginia estate law. I found her the modern way. Google, estate attorney, Richmond, Virginia. She was result number 3. Reviews called her thorough, fair, no nonsense. What I didn't know until I walked in, Margaret Foley had attended James Madison University with my mother, class of '91. They'd drifted apart decades earlier. When I gave my last name, Mitchell, she asked quietly, "Any relation to Jolene Hargrave?" Then moved on without pressing. Professional. I appreciated that. I handed her the DNA results, the estate planning email, the group chat screenshots. She read everything twice, sipped black coffee, and stayed silent until she finished. The language is unambiguous. If the will directs assets to biological children only, and you can prove your biological child, your claim is strong, very strong. And if another family member isn't biological his, she set the coffee down. Under the precise wording your father chose, that person would have no claim whatsoever. Silence stretched. You'd need more than a consumer test for court, but you may never reach court. Men like your father don't stop at surface results. He'll demand retesting, and when he does, he'll test everyone. That's how they operate. They dig until the hole swallows them. I nodded. You understand this will detonate your family. I met her eyes across the cluttered desk, winter light striping the blinds in pale bars, and answered honestly, it was never whole to begin with. January 14th, 4 days before the reading, Dad called. Not to mend, not to reconsider, to remind me of my assigned place. The reading's Saturday. I invited you so you can hear Howard say it in person. You're not getting a cent. Don't come crying, don't come begging, and don't embarrass this family any more than you already have. I held the phone away and watched the seconds climb. 2 minutes, 11 seconds. When he finished, I said 4 words. I'll be there, Dad. He hung up first. He always did. Garrett's text arrived 20 minutes later. Cal, just accept it. Dad's not changing. Take the L gracefully. Take the L, as if my entire life had been a game score. Then Mom, at 9 p.m., voice low and unsteady, the way it sounded after her second glass of Pinot Grigio. Caroline, please don't come. It'll be easier for everyone. Easier for everyone, the Mitchell family creed. I didn't reply to any of them. I plugged my phone, poured a glass of water, and stood at the window staring down at the dark parking lot. My Civic waited under the street lamp, frost glazing the windshield. I was on break between shifts. In 6 hours, I'd be back in the ICU, adjusting ventilators for a child who weighed less than my coat. Calm, precise, essential. Making choices measured in oxygen saturation, heart rate, milligrams. Then, in 4 days, I'd walk into a room of people who'd spent my lifetime convincing me I didn't matter, and let a single sheet of paper speak the truth I'd never been allowed to voice. Dana was right. Let the facts do the talking. $140 total, more than I usually spent on clothes in 3 months. Dana helped me rehearse that evening. Not lines to deliver, but boundaries to hold. You don't owe them an explanation, she said over reheated hospital cafeteria soup. You walk in, you sit, you wait for the moment, and you place the envelope on the table. That's it. Let the paper speak. I nodded. For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't entering a Mitchell family gathering braced to endure. I was arriving prepared. January 17th, the night before. Sleep wouldn't come, not from fear exactly. It felt more like vertigo, standing at the brink of a drop where your body registers the change before your mind fully grasps it. I sat on my bed with a shoebox of old photos, most dated from before Dad decided I wasn't his. One kept pulling me back, me at 5, perched on his lap in the backyard, both of us laughing, his arms secure around me, my head thrown back, sun haloing us. The last time he held me, I was 5. I don't recall what was funny. I only remember feeling safe. I stared at that photo a long time. Tomorrow, I would enter a room and conclude the family as it had existed, not destroy it. It had been broken for 20 years. We'd simply refused to name the fracture. But I would end the performance everyone had upheld, Dad as righteous patriarch, Garrett as deserving heir, Mom as devoted wife, me as the error, all of it unraveled by a single sheet of paper in my bag. I called Dana at 11. Am I doing the right thing? She answered without pause. Are they doing the right thing to you? Silence. Callie, that man humiliated you in front of the entire family on a holiday. He's trying to legally erase you. Your brother treats you like an afterthought. Your mother watched it all for 20 years and chose her comfort over your dignity. She exhaled. You didn't start this. You're just the one brave enough to end it. I hung up, opened my laptop. The DNA results glowed. 99.9998%. I closed it, slid the notarized envelope into the navy tote I bought to match the blazer, and set the bag by the door. Turned off the light. I didn't sleep, but I was ready. January 18th, 9:47 a.m. Howard Pratt's office occupied a red brick professional building on Broad Street, the sort that smelled of old carpet and quiet power. Second floor, Berber carpet, walnut wainscoting it, diplomas framed with meticulous symmetry. I arrived 13 minutes early on purpose. I wanted to be seated before the others entered. The conference room was long and narrow, walnut table, 12 leather chairs, a window facing the parking lot. Howard's assistant offered water. I accepted, placed it on a coaster, set my bag on the floor beside my chair, the envelope inside. They arrived in waves. Uncle Dennis and Aunt Brenda first, quiet nods, the careful courtesy of people sensing trouble ahead. Then cousins I hadn't spoken to since last Thanksgiving. Then Garrett and Stacy. Garrett in a sport coat worth more than my rent, Stacy's heels clicking on the hardwood. 15 people total. Not the full clan, but the inner circle, the ones who mattered. Dad answered last. Of course he did. Rick Mitchell didn't walk into rooms. He claimed them. Charcoal blazer, starched white shirt, Breitling catching the overhead light. He took the head of the table. Garrett settled to his right. Mom sat to his left, eyes already rimmed red, fingers twisting her Mikimoto bracelet like prayer beads. Dad's gaze landed on me. Surprised you showed up. I didn't reply. I folded my hands on the table. Navy blazer, tailored trousers, leather Oxfords, hair pulled back. No earrings, no makeup beyond a precise line of red lipstick, Dana's half-joking advice. Armor comes in many forms. Howard Pratt entered with a leather binder. He took the far end of the table, cleared his throat. This document represents the stated testamentary intentions of Richard Allen Mitchell, prepared in consultation with this office, dated January 3rd of this year. Skip the preamble, Howard, Dad interrupted, loud enough for everyone. Get to it. Howard glanced, then nodded. He turned the page. Article 4, Section 1. Distribution of assets. All real property, business interests, and financial assets held by Richard Allen Mitchell shall pass exclusively to his biological children as verified by legally recognized documentation upon the date of his passing. Dad leans back, satisfaction settling over him like a man who'd just driven the last nail. See? Black and white. Garrett nodded. It's just business, Cal. A few relatives shifted. Aunt Brenda pressed her lips thin. Uncle Dennis studied the table grain. No one spoke. Howard continued, outlining the assets: the Briarwood house, Mitchell and Sons shares, investment accounts, life insurance. Roughly $3.2 million estimated value, all directed to biological children. The phrase struck again and again, each repetition lifting Dad's chin a fraction higher. When he finished, he removed his glasses and clasped his hands. This document remains a draft. It requires execution, signatures, and witnesses to become binding. Mr. Mitchell wished to share his intentions with the family before finalization. He scanned the room. Any questions or objections? Silence. Dad smiled. The room exhaled. My hand moved to my bag. I have an objection. My voice emerged steadier than I anticipated, low, clear. The tone I use at 3 a.m. when a ventilator alarms and frightened parents need calm. Every head turned. Dad's smile froze. Excuse me? Not emotional, I said. Procedural. I stood, walked to the conference room door, opened it. Margaret Foley stepped in, gray pantsuit, reading glasses on a chain, leather portfolio under her arm. She'd waited in the hallway 11 minutes. We timed it. Who the hell is this? Dad demanded. My name is Margaret Foley. I'm an estate attorney licensed in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I represent Caroline Mitchell. The room stilled. You hired a lawyer? Dad's voice rose. Not yet fury, but the low rumble before thunder. For what? There's nothing to contest. You're not Mr. Mitchell, Margaret cut in cleanly. Your draft will directs assets to biological children only. We wish to submit documentation pertinent to that clause. She nodded to me. I reached into my bag. My fingers closed around the envelope, smooth, sealed, the notary stamp faintly raised under my thumb. I'd carried it 3 days. It weighed almost nothing. It weighed everything. I placed it on the table, centered between the water pitcher and the binder. 15 pairs of eyes fixed on it. Mom's breathing shifted, shallow, rapid, the sound of a patient sensing bad news before the words arrive. I looked at my father. Dad, I wanted to know if I was yours. I asked you at Thanksgiving if it entered the whole family. You gave me a DNA kit. You turned an AABB-accredited laboratory in Bethesda, Maryland. Test subjects: Richard Allen Mitchell, alleged father; Caroline Rose Mitchell, child. Samples received December 2nd. Analysis completed December 19th. Margaret paused. The room was so quiet I could hear the furnace cycle through the vents. Conclusion: based on analysis of genetic markers, the probability of paternity is 99.9998%. Richard Allen Mitchell is the biological father of Caroline Rose Mitchell. She set the pages down with deliberate care. Dad stared at the document as though it were written in a dead language he'd once known. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not possible. The lab is federally accredited. Results are notarized. Chain of custody is fully documented. I have 2 additional certified copies if you'd like your own counsel to review them. Garrett lurched forward in his chair. She faked it. She had to have faked it. There's no way. Mr. Mitchell, Margaret said, voice level, unhurried. AABB accreditation is the standard courts across the United States rely on for paternity determinations. These results carry the same weight as a judicially ordered test. Garrett's mouth worked soundlessly. Mom hadn't moved. Her palms lay flat on the table. Her eyes were locked on the paper. Her expression, I'll carry it forever, was that of someone watching a building collapse in slow motion, knowing they're still inside. Dad turned to Howard. Howard, can she do this? Howard removed his glasses slowly. Rick, the results appear legitimate. I didn't ask for a recommendation, Dad cut in. Margaret folded her hands. Before you request a retest, which you're entitled to, you may wish to consider testing all of your children. Given what we now know, it would seem prudent. The word all landed like a grenade with a long fuse. Dad's gaze flicked to Garrett, then to Mom, then back to me. For the first time in 20 years, I watched certainty fracture behind his eyes. I didn't say it. I want to be very clear. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't name the affair. I didn't point a finger at Garrett. I didn't have to. The arithmetic was already working its way through the room, face by face, chair by chair. If Callie is Rick's biological daughter, and Rick has spent 2 decades convinced his wife cheated, then who was the product of the affair? I kept my tone even. I'm your biological child, Dad. The test confirms it. Now, if you'd like to proceed with a will that leaves everything to your biological children, I fully support that. The sentence hung there like a match held over dry grass. Garrett shot to his feet. What the hell is she implying? I met his eyes. I'm not implying anything, Garrett. I'm presenting facts. Dad always taught me that's what Mitchells do. His face flushed, not embarrassment, but fury climbing from collar to hairline. He spun toward Mom. Tell her she's wrong. Mom, tell her. Jolene didn't look at him. She stared at the table, both hands pressed flat, as though she could physically hold the wood and everything else from splintering. Rick, her voice cracked. We need to talk privately. Sit down, Jolene. Dad's tone was a blade. He hadn't left his chair, but something tectonic had shifted behind his eyes. Slow, irreversible. He was looking at Garrett, the way he'd looked at me across dining tables, holiday dinners, and group chat captions for 20 years. Aunt Brenda leaned forward. Rick, what is going on? Uncle Dennis placed a palm on the table. Everyone, let's just take a breath. No one breathed. The room held its air collectively. Jolene began to cry. Not quietly, the sound of something long contained finally giving way. A levee, a wall, a lie braced by 30 years of silence and a Mikomoto bracelet. She was crying because she was terrified, and every person in that room felt it. Dad turned to her slowly, the way a man turns when he already knows the answer, but needs it spoken aloud, the way you need a doctor to say the word, even when the scan is already glowing on the screen. Is there something you need to tell me, Jolene? She shook her head, then stopped, then covered her face with both hands. The Mikomoto bracelet slid down her wrist and clattered softly against the walnut. Rick, it was before Callie was born. It was... Who? Greg Nolan. The name dropped like a stone into still water. Ripples spread instantly. Aunt Brenda's hand flew to her mouth. Uncle Dennis closed his eyes. 2 cousins exchanged a glance so swift you'd miss it if you blinked. Greg Nolan. The older Mitchells knew the name. Subcontractor for Mitchell & Sons in the 1990s, framing crew, back when Dad was still building the company out of a pickup truck. He'd been around the house, around Jolene. It was one time, Rick, one time, early 94. You were gone for 3 months on that Chesapeake Bay project and I was alone, and... Early 94, Dad repeated, voice flat, mechanical. He was doing the math. Everyone was. Garrett was born October 1994. The room understood before Garrett did. You could see the slow, sick dawning on every face, the realization that a story believed for a lifetime had been built on sand. Garrett stared at Mom. Mom, what are you saying? Mom, tell her she's wrong. Mom didn't look at him. She stared at the table, both hands pressed flat, as though she could physically hold the wood and everything else from splintering. Rick, her voice cracked. We need to talk privately. Sit down, Jolene. Dad's tone was a blade. He hadn't left his chair, but something tectonic had shifted behind his eyes. Slow, irreversible. He was looking at Garrett, the way he'd looked at me across dining tables, holiday dinners, and group chat captions for 20 years. Aunt Brenda leaned forward. Rick, what is going on? Uncle Dennis placed a palm on the table. You tore up the Father's Day card I made when I was 8. You didn't come to my graduation. You cut my tuition and let me shoulder $47,000 in loans. You posted about me in the family group chat like I was a punchline. You slid a DNA kit across the Thanksgiving table in front of 25 people and dared me to prove I belonged. I paused. And now that kit, your joke, proves I was your only biological child this entire time. The daughter you discarded was the one who was real. The son you gave everything to wasn't." I stopped because I'm not cruel. Garrett stood at the window, shoulders trembling. Whatever he had done, whatever role he'd played in the years of favoritism, he hadn't chosen this any more than I had. "I didn't come here to take anyone's money," I said. "I didn't come for revenge. I came because you summoned me. You wanted the truth read aloud in front of the family. So here it is." I looked at him, at the Breitling on his wrist, at the hands that had built a company and torn a child's card with the same casual force. "I don't need your money. I don't need your name. I just needed you to know that your cruelest joke finally told the truth you were too afraid to face." I sat down. The room was silent except for my mother's quiet, broken sobs and the soft cycling of the furnace through the vents. No one looked at my father. Everyone looked at me. Aunt Brenda moved first. She rose slowly, like someone who had carried a decision too long and finally set it down. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me, not a polite embrace, a real one, the kind that says, "I see you," and "I'm sorry," without needing the words. "I should have said something years ago," she whispered against my shoulder. "I watched him do this to you, and I said nothing. I'm sorry, Callie." Uncle Dennis cleared his throat. He looked at Dad, and the expression on his face wasn't sympathy. It was harder, sharper. "Rick," he said quietly, "what have you done?" Dad didn't answer. Cousin Tara, the one who'd sent the single grimacing emoji in the group chat, stood and walked to my side of the table. She didn't speak. She simply stood beside Brenda, beside me. A silent vote. Others followed. Not everyone. Some stared at the table, some studied their phones, but enough, 5, then 6, then 8, shifted chairs, weight, attention toward the far end of the room, the end near the door, the end near the kitchen, the seat I'd occupied my entire life. Howard Pratt closed his binder. He removed his glasses and spoke with the careful gravity of someone dictating for the record. "Mr. Mitchell, I strongly advise postponing any further action on this estate plan until the relevant facts can be independently verified. The document as drafted is no longer straightforward." That was Howard's measured way of saying, "You wrote a will to punish your daughter, and it just became the mechanism of your own undoing." Garrett was already gone. He'd slipped out during Brenda's hug. Stacy's heels had clicked rapidly down the hallway behind him. I heard the building's front door open and close. Mom was being helped to her feet by Brenda and a cousin's name I should remember but don't. Mascara streaked her cheeks in 2 dark lines. As they guided her past my chair, she looked at me, just once. She said nothing, but her eyes carried everything. "I'm sorry, and you were never supposed to find out." Dad remained alone at the head of the table. The Breitling caught the light, the binder sat closed, the DNA report lay untouched in the center, like a verdict no one wanted to be the first to touch. He still hadn't spoken. In the hallway afterward, as the family filtered toward the parking lot, Margaret kept her voice low but unflinching. "Here's the situation. Your father's new will, the one Howard just read, is never executed. It's a draft. Legally, it's worthless. His previous will, filed in 2021, "I called you Honorary Mitchell your whole life," he said. His voice cracked on the word honorary. "I said it like a joke. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, you were allowed to attend. And I'm the one who—" He didn't finish. "You're still my brother, Garrett. That hasn't changed." "How can you say that after everything I—" "Because it's true. Neither of us chose this." I heard something on the other end I'd never heard from Garrett Mitchell in 31 years. He was crying. Not the frustrated, angry kind, the kind that comes when the scaffolding collapses and you realize the building you stood on never existed. And you know what? I want to ask you something. If you were in Garrett's place, if you discovered every privilege, every advantage, every golden boy moment of your life had been built on a lie told before you were born, what would you do? I genuinely don't know the answer. I don't hate Garrett. He was a victim too, in his own way. He just never knew it until now. Tell me what you think. Drop it in the comments. I didn't cry. I'd done my crying years ago. Come have dinner sometime, I said. I have one chair, but I'll borrow another. He laughed, just barely. It was a start. 2 weeks after the reading, Mom showed up at my apartment. I saw her through the peephole, wool coat, no makeup, hair unwashed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. She stood in the hallway for 5 full minutes before she knocked. I know because I watched. I opened the door. She looked at my studio, the 450 square feet, the counter that doubled as desk and dining table, the one chair, the tiny Douglas fir still up because I hadn't had the heart to take it down. Something in her face collapsed, not because the apartment was small, because it was mine, because I'd built this life with nothing she or Dad had given me, and it was still standing. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She sat on the edge of my bed, the only other place to sit, and pressed her palms together between her knees. She didn't look at me. She looked at the floor. I knew Garrett wasn't Rick's from the day he was born. The timing. I knew, and I was terrified, so I said nothing. And when your father started to suspect, when he looked at you with your red hair and decided you were proof of what I'd done, I let him. I let him blame you because as long as he was suspicious of you, he wasn't suspicious of Garrett. And as long as he wasn't suspicious of Garrett, he wouldn't divorce me. She swallowed. I used you as a shield, Caroline. For 20 years, I let my daughter take the punishment from my lie. The words hung in the air of my tiny apartment. Yes, you did. She flinched. I can't forgive you today. Maybe not ever, but I don't want to carry your secret anymore, Mom, and I won't carry your guilt either. That's yours. She nodded. She stood. She walked to the door. I noticed her wrists were bare. No Mikimoto bracelet. She left without asking for a hug. I closed the door, leaned against it, and stood there until my breathing steadied. Then I made myself dinner alone in my apartment on my own terms. February 14th, Valentine's Day of all days. The universe has a strange sense of timing. I was eating lunch in the hospital cafeteria, chicken sandwich, orange juice, fluorescent lights, the usual, when my phone buzzed. Email notification from Richard A. Mitchell. Subject, to my family. Recipients, the Mitchell family distribution list. All 42 members. The same list he'd used to share the DNA kit photo. The same list he'd used to announce the will. I opened it. To my family. I have spent 20 years treating my daughter Caroline as though she did not belong. I called her a mistake. I denied her opportunities I freely gave to others. I humiliated her publicly on multiple occasions, most recently at Thanksgiving, in front of people she had every right to feel safe around. I was wrong. Caroline is my biological daughter. She has always been my biological daughter. The doubt I held was unfounded, and the damage I caused because of it is something I will have to live with for the rest of my life. She did not ask for money. She did not ask for the business. She asked for one thing, a public correction. This is that correction. Caroline, you were never a mistake. Richard A. Mitchell. I read it twice. The cafeteria noise, trays clattering, someone's phone ringing, 2 nurses debating a shift swap, continued around me like nothing had changed. Dana slid into the seat across from me. She'd seen my face. What is it? I turned the phone toward her. She read it, looked at me. You okay? I thought about it, really thought about it. Not the reflexive, I'm fine you give during a hard week, but an honest inventory. 20 years of subtraction, 1 Thanksgiving, 1 envelope, 1 piece of paper that said what my father couldn't. I'm free, I said. Dana nodded. She didn't push. She just sat there with me, eating her own terrible cafeteria sandwich under the same fluorescent lights in the same break that would end in 12 minutes. It was the most ordinary moment of my life, and it was enough. Margaret called in early March. Your father wants to revise the will. New language, assets split equally between you and Garrett. He's filing a petition for adult adoption. Garrett agreed. Virginia courts process these in a few weeks. I fought for the truth. The truth was always enough. Margaret paused on the line. I'll draft the paperwork. I signed the documents on a Tuesday evening at my kitchen counter. The same pen I use for patient charts. The same table. The same 450 square feet. Somewhere out there, a 20-year-old nursing student who grew up being told she wasn't enough, who worked doubles, borrowed money, and kept showing up anyway, would one day receive a letter. It would tell her someone believed in her future, someone who had once stood in her exact position and made it through. She wouldn't know my name. That was fine. I didn't need anyone to know my name. I just needed someone to get the chance I almost didn't have. April arrived, the first warm Saturday in months, the kind of Virginia evening when dogwoods bloom white and pink against green lawns. The air smells of fresh-cut grass, and golden light lingers until almost 8 o'clock. I hosted dinner. My studio apartment, my rules. 6 people gathered around a second-hand pine table from IKEA, the one I'd bought so I could stop eating standing at the counter. No chairs had initials carved into their backs, no assigned seats, no hierarchy. Dana sat to my left, already locked in spirited debate with my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, 72, widowed, the woman who'd left soup outside my door every Tuesday since I moved in, over whether cornbread should contain sugar. 2 ICU nurses, Marcus of Lee, were dissecting ventilator protocols with the same intensity most people reserve for football stats. Margaret Foley had sent a bottle of wine with a small note taped to it, MF. And at the far end, in a borrowed folding chair, sat Garrett. He'd called the week before. No breezy golden boy tone this time. Quiet, careful. The voice of someone still learning the shape of who he was. Can I come? I don't really know where else to go. Bring dessert, I told him. And don't bring the Tahoe. Parking's tight. He arrived with a store-bought pie and keys to a Honda Civic he'd bought 2 weeks earlier. I didn't ask what happened to the Tahoe. I didn't need to. I sat at the head of the table, not because I was important, but because it was closest to the stove and the pasta needed stirring. Dad wasn't there. We weren't there yet. Maybe we never would be. But on my refrigerator, held by a magnet from the hospital gift shop, was a piece of faded construction paper, torn down the middle long ago, then carefully taped back together. To the best dad in the world. I'd kept it all these years. Not for him, for the 8-year-old girl who made it. She deserved to know it had survived. I looked around my table. Dana laughing, Garrett listening, really listening. Mrs. Patterson winning the cornbread argument. Evening light pouring through the single window. Warm, gold, ordinary. Family isn't blood. Family isn't a name on a will. Family is who stays when the truth finally comes out. And for the first time in my life, every person at my table had chosen to be there. That was enough. That was everything. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever been the one overlooked, underestimated, or erased by the very people who were supposed to love you first, I want you to hear this clearly. Your worth was never theirs to decide. If you connected with Caroline's journey, please hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. There's another story waiting in the wings. Check the link in the description. It might be exactly what you need today. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.